Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 31 of Real Stories. Today I have 3 let's not meet type stories for you that are sure to make you think and also creep you out. So, without any further ado, let's get started. So this happened to me on Saturday. I, a 29-year-old female, live in a decent neighborhood. Not the best, but definitely not one usually thought of as super dangerous. It wasn't even that late. It was like 9:30 p.m., and it is summer in my country, so it had been dark for an hour or two at most. I had left my friend taking transport back home, and since my friend had left in a rush, there was a thing I wanted to tell that I felt I would forget once I was home. But I got my phone taken from my hands a few months ago, so I was waiting until I was in a safe place to take it out. So I turn a corner, and there's literally 1 block to my house, and this is a pretty small street. I thought I was safe, and suddenly someone talks to me. His words were slurred, so I didn't quite get what he said, and it was dark, but after a moment, I understood he was telling me to give him my phone or my wallet or something. I stared, and despite the darkness, I saw something in his hand, which he was holding very much like a gun. I think it may have been fake, but still, I was terrified. For some reason, I looked around, and not so far away, walking towards me, was another woman. I screamed for help and ran away from the man, all the while bracing myself for the pain in case the gun wasn't fake. And then the woman yelled at me to stop running and to get inside of the building closest to us. We did. There, after having a panic attack, the woman told me the man had been next to a car that I didn't see because I was so fixated on the possible gun. I doubt the man wanted anything other than my phone, but still, the fact that he had a quick and easy escape and that there is a possibility that I could have lost more than just my cell phone is terrifying. So to that man, let's never meet again. To the woman and her friend who walked me that block home, and also the doorwoman that gave me water when I was panicking, I'm sorry I didn't ask your names or properly thank you, but you guys are my heroes. Ooh, that was definitely a scary predicament. And it really goes to show you that you can become victimized really anywhere, unfortunately. So you always have to be aware of your surroundings, even if you're on your way home and, it's like a very short distance. Anything can happen at any time, so always best to be prepared. So in this instance, our author was walking home, and it's not even super late out. She's about a block away, and some guy comes out of the darkness, slurring his speech, so it's a little hard to understand what he's saying, but he's saying something to the effect of, give me your valuables. He's definitely robbing her, and he has something in his hand that it's hard for her to see, but what seems like a gun. So she's getting robbed at gunpoint, and that is a really scary predicament because a lot of people are managing guns in a very unsafe manner when robbing people. You never know if their finger's on the trigger or whatever. So it's always best that if somebody has the drop on you like that, to just comply because it's not worth, dying over your phone or your wallet or whatever. So she says that she's not sure if the gun was real or not, but honestly, in that situation, you got to kind of assume that it is because, there's nothing you could do if they have the drop on you like that. So she looks around as this is happening, and walking towards her was another woman. So she screams and runs away from the guy, and the woman yelled at her to stop running and to get inside of a building, which was really smart. So the woman and her friend ended up walking her back to her home, and even this door woman who was working at her building gave her a water when she was panicking. So they were really the true heroes of this story, as they were able to, help a person that they could tell was in distress in a bad situation. And that's really awesome because, like we talked about in previous episodes, we've got to look out for each other. There needs to be more compassion in the world. And when you have situations like this, compassion and empathy and just a helpful attitude can save somebody's life. Like this probably saved this woman's life. It's just really important to look out for our fellow man, because there's a lot of stories like this where, a person intervening can be the difference between life and death. We've had stories where a person intervening can just call out to that person as like, hey, what are you doing? And the person who's victimizing them will get spooked and run away, because a lot of the times just getting called out it brings them back to reality. And it's like, oh gosh, what am I doing? I need to get out of here. Somebody saw this. So just the knowledge that somebody else is around makes criminals second guess themselves a lot of the times. And just another witness to something weird that may happen can also prevent a crime. If somebody knows that there's a bunch of witnesses around, they're far less likely to commit a crime most of the time, if they're thinking at all rationally. The issue is that a lot of people don't think rationally when they're committing crimes. But just a little bit that you could do to help save somebody's life. And you don't want that on your conscience if you're like, oh, I could have did something, but I didn't. And now, this thing happened. And you don't always have to get involved. You have to assess. If it's a very dangerous situation, then sometimes what you need to do is hide and call for help. But there is a very famous case in New York City. It's called like the Kitty Genovese case, where there's a woman who was, being attacked and murdered out in the street, and she's yelling out for help. And people assumed that other people would call the police or whatever, so nobody said anything, or nobody did anything because they assumed somebody else would. It's really scary, because if somebody would have just taken the initiative and did that, then maybe that woman would still be alive today. Look out for women if they look like they're scared. Look in people's eyes. You could tell a lot of the times in people's eyes and their facial expressions if they're in a very uncomfortable situation. And there's a lot of different things that you can do to help them out. Even if you don't want to get directly involved, there are things, even just mentioning it to somebody else if you're at work, or jotting it down, taking details, anything that you could do to help somebody that looks like they're in a bad situation. Because a lot of the times, if they look like they're really scared, chances are they are, and they're begging for somebody to help them. So definitely a very, very scary story, but one that at least had a happy ending. Hey guys. The start of the new year can be stressful. There's a lot of things going on. The weather's kind of crazy. There's holidays and new beginnings. And all of that could be overwhelming. So if you might be feeling overwhelmed, depressed, stressed, or anxious, today's sponsor, BetterHelp, is here to help you. BetterHelp offers licensed therapists who are trained to listen and help you. You can talk to your therapist in an online environment at your convenience. And there is a broad range of expertise in their network of over 20,000 therapists that give you access to help that may not be available in your area. You just fill out a quick questionnaire to help assess your specific needs, and you get matched with a therapist in as little as 48 hours. You can then schedule video and phone sessions, plus you can exchange unlimited messages with your therapist. You can request a new therapist at any time with no additional charges. So join the 3 million plus people who have taken charge of their mental health with an experienced BetterHelp therapist. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/realstories. That's betterhelp.com/realstories. All one word. What better way to start off the new year than by getting your mental health in order? It's so important, guys. So start today with BetterHelp. Now, let's get back to the show. For this next story, I'm not sure if the author's first language is English, so bear with them, as some of this may be a little hard to understand. Back in 2013, I just started on an education, and after the first school period, I had to go out and find an internship to be able to progress. But at the time, it proved to be almost impossible to get one. So while I was looking, I decided to take another job just to make sure we had food on the table. After searching for a while, I found out that a friend of my family's had his own handicap bus company, a kind of taxi service for wheelchair users and otherwise disabled people. And he needed someone to cover the night shift since it was a bus that had to be on call at least 22 hours a day. Seeing that I'm quite the night owl, I immediately told him that I'd be happy to take the job after I got the necessary license. The job was pretty basic. Pick up people and drop them off where they needed to go, and sometimes use a machine to get the wheelchairs up or down some stairs. When there was no trips, I drove to a designated area and did whatever while waiting. I quickly found a truck stop in the area where I could park and just catch some Z's while waiting. There was a gas station where I could buy coffee in the early hours of the shift, and on the other side of the gas station's parking lot, on the opposite side of the truck stop, there was a run-down restaurant with a motel connected to it. To not disturb the sleeping truckers, if I got a trip in the middle of the night, I usually parked on the restaurant side. After parking there every night for a while, I noticed one particular room had a lot of people come and go. In the beginning, I thought nothing of it. But then one night, in the end of summer, while I was half asleep with the windows slightly open, I suddenly heard yelling coming from the motel, and a dude came tumbling out of the room and started running. And a few seconds later, a big dude came running after him with something in his hand. I could not make out what it was. I thought it was none of my business, so I went back to my half-sleeping waiting stage. Not much time passed and my phone went off. I had a trip a couple hours away, so I turned on the bus and was leaving the parking lot when I saw a big guy coming around the corner. The rest of the night, I had back-to-back trips, so I didn't park until I got home. The day after, I didn't get a return to home zone until 2 or 3 a.m. When I arrived in the parking lot, the area where I used to park had fist-sized rocks strewn all over the place. Not connecting the dots at the time, I just parked a few spots over and started waiting. I fell asleep pretty fast, but was jerked back into reality when a car right in front of the bus honked its horn, flashed on its high beams, and revved its engine. I thought it was just some idiot who noticed me sleeping and found it funny to try and make me crap my pants. So I jumped out of the bus and was about to tell him to go screw off, but instead of stopping or driving off, the driver made the start brake thing with the car, indicating that I was the one who should screw off. And then I connected the dots. Not wanting to seem like a pushover, I stood still and stared at the car. Not that I could actually see anything with the high beams almost blinding me, and after what seemed like a really long time, but most likely would not have been more than 30 seconds, the car drove off. And after that, I decided to park near the trucks from then on. A month or so passed, and nothing had happened since the car episode, and I figured that nothing more would if I just parked by the trucks. Then one night, I had a long 12-hour shift on a Sunday, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. And I didn't have time to eat dinner before work that day, and during the first half of my shift, I had back-to-back trips with no time to eat. So when I got a return to the home zone, I quickly parked in the far end of the almost empty truck stop and got ready to eat my now very late dinner that my fiance had packed for me. I wanted to watch some TV on my phone while eating, so I sat with my back against the driver's side door and got comfy. While turning my back to the door, I had accidentally hit the door lock with my elbow, but that was my luck. As I was sitting there scrolling through Netflix on my phone, I suddenly felt the bus rock, and I heard the clack of the door handle behind me smack back into position. I quickly turned and saw a dude with a hood over his head quickly crouching and proceeding to lay down on the ground and crawl under the bus with a big kitchen knife in his right hand. I quickly got up and made sure the other two doors were locked, and then I looked in all directions to see if I could spot him. He was still under the bus, and I was sure as hell not jumping out at this time, since the knife made his intentions pretty clear. I turned on the engine, turned on the spots on the back of the bus, and looked around to see if I had scared him off, and lucky for me, it did. I saw him run off into a bushy, woody area at the end of the truck stop. I never parked at that truck stop again, and that night I made sure all doors were locked every time I parked. Wow, that was a pretty crazy story. Another good example of why you always lock your doors. So we have our author who is in some higher form of education, and in order to progress, they need to get a job. They start working for a family friend who has their own handicap bus company, where they pick up people who are disabled and in wheelchairs and take them to, their destinations. So in between these trips, they find out that a place that they could park and maybe catch up on some sleep is a truck stop. Now, guys, I'm not going to lie. Truck stops are sketchy. There's just a lot of weird stuff that goes on there because a lot of people that are there are like on the move. So sometimes it's like it's a place where you could do something weird and then leave and then kind of leave behind whatever weird stuff you just did. So I don't know, kind of just a weird place. But anyways, they decide to park near this truck stop. And near the truck stop is a restaurant and a motel attached. So a motel at a truck stop also is going to be, a hotbed for weird stuff. There's going to be, probably some sex work, probably some drug use, just a lot of weird things. So the one time that they park there, they're woken up by yelling coming from the motel. And a dude comes tumbling out of the room and started running away. And a few seconds later, a big guy came running after him with something in his hand. So already, if they didn't know before, this motel is going to be weird. But it's a good place for them to chill in between their driving. So they continue to go there. However, a month or so later, they go there after working a super long shift and they're just trying to chill and eat some dinner. And what they hear next is the sound of like trying to open the door. Like if you know what that sounds like, it's like when you try and pull a door handle, but it's locked, so it just kind of snaps back into place. They hear that sound and they look behind them and there's a guy with his hood on with a big kitchen knife in his right hand. Obviously did not have good intentions. So thank God that they had their door locked because they probably could have gotten killed if they didn't. And luckily they end up turning on the bus and the guy kind of scampers away. But that was a really scary predicament because there's a lot of weird stuff, like I said, that goes on at these truck stops. I believe there's been a couple serial killers in the past who have operated in or around certain truck stops because it's a weird spot where people are always coming and going. So, there's not a lot of, witnesses around. People are kind of in a hurry most of the time, or they're just trying to sleep, so people aren't really paying attention. So it's a weird spot, but definitely a crazy story, and keep those doors locked. This is my first Reddit post, and it's going to be heavy. It's going to contain mentions of physical and mental abuse, so this is a trigger warning for everyone. I, an 18-year-old female, met my ex, a male, 22, in February of 2020, but didn't end up dating him until I was closer to my 17th birthday, because he still lived with his girlfriend. He told me they were just friends and he didn't like her like that anymore. And I didn't find out until later that they were actually still doing things together, and meeting him was the biggest mistake of my life. Everything started off great, as every relationship goes. I sent pics because he was my boyfriend, so of course, I let him save them for later use. Another big mistake. I noticed that they were still texting, and when I went through his phone, he was saying he still loved her and he missed her. I was deeply hurt and called him out on it. He apologized and said it would never happen again, and I told him to text her that we were dating, and he did. She was mad. She stopped paying for the house and helping him with car payments, and at the time, he had to quit his Taco Bell job and refused to do his new job Ubering because, quote, I need to practice League of Legends because I want to be a pro league streamer. So I worked my butt off and ended up losing my job because the manager didn't let me work without a doctor's note. So I was stuck working his job while he played his game. Before I met him, I had about $4,500 in my savings. He ended up using my card to pay his phone bills, car payments, the apartment, daily weed, fast food, and new league accounts. He kept losing his accounts due to telling people to off themselves or using the F slur or N-word. But the worst has yet to happen. I found out he was using an old tablet to exclusively watch X-rated videos, set up dating accounts, and have different Instagram accounts. But on these accounts, he was pretending to be women. I called him out about it and told him I wanted to leave. He freaks out, jumping around, screaming and crying, saying he would change, and I trusted him. I don't know why. As time went on, things got worse, and I was scared to leave, and by the end of this, you will see why. He had shoved me into a wall and getting in my face, screaming, "You stole my car key because you don't want me to work because you're jealous of other girls," which was stupid because he had thrown his car keys at me during a different argument. But one day, I went through the iPad and found that he was actively not just sending, but selling my pictures from when I was 16 or 17 and doing the same with his other ex. I started to try and get my stuff together and put Gorilla Glue in the charging port just to get rid of the filth I had just seen. When he found out that it no longer charged after he used my card to get us food, he was livid. He started screaming and getting in my face. I tried to go around him and grab my things, but when my back was turned, he pulled me down to the ground. He then wrestled me until he was able to put me in a chokehold. I was sobbing and just accepted that this would be the end. But before I blacked out, he let me go and I started gasping for air and gagging from the excessive coughing as he just stood and laughed at me. I tried to crawl away from him when he grabbed my leg and started dragging me out of the apartment. I kicked to try and get him off, which just made him pull me like a dog playing tug of war. He eventually dragged me out, keeping my wallet, keys, and all of my valuables. So I sat crying for my stuff back so I could just go home. He came outside and he pulled me down the apartment stairs by my leg, and I was left with extreme bruising and some cuts. I did end up calling the police, and they did absolutely nothing. Fast forward. He had to move because he had nowhere to stay or live after getting evicted from the apartment, and I had gotten a new job. One day, it was particularly cold out, and I went to get a shirt out of my car, and there he was. He was sitting in my car on his phone. I left the door unlocked because I work in a good area. I called him a cheater and told him to leave. He got out of the car and was starting to go around the back, so I jumped in and tried to lock the door from the back seat. He ran over and pulled the door open and started to try to pull me out of the car. I started screaming and kicking at him. Thankfully, a customer saw this happen and called the police. They arrested him and they told me to go home for the night, which they ended up firing me for. Unfortunately, he got bailed out, and while he was in jail, he had given out my phone number to other people in there. He walked 4.5 hours to my house after he was released and was looking around my backyard when my neighbor saw him and called my dad. My dad got his truck with his gun and waited for him to come out of the gas station. He eventually did, but he ran off. He had harassed me, saying that he was going to show up to my graduation and ruin everything, and has gotten to the point that he's making multiple fake accounts on Snapchat, Instagram, and TikTok, pretending to be me and his other exes. As of today, January 1st, 2023, he still pretends to be high school girls, selling our pictures and making fake accounts. Yikes, guys. I had a real tough time reading that story. I'm not going to lie. The message was important, so I thought that it was definitely worthy of reading, but just any domestic stuff always, hits different, and it's always pretty uncomfortable to read. But it is an important story because there's a lot of people who go through stuff like this. So it is an important story to tell. So our author began dating this dude around when she was 17. And they're already off to like a weird vibe because the guy was still living with his girlfriend. And he had told her that they were just friends and that he didn't like her or whatever. But she comes to find out that he was still, doing stuff with her and, pretty much still in a relationship with her at the time. Eventually, the girl who he was living with, who she thought to be his ex, finds out that he's now in a new relationship with our author. She's very upset. She stops paying for bills because in addition to being, already a scumbag, he doesn't pay for bills and he wants to be a pro streamer, which nothing against you streamers out there. I'm just saying it's definitely an interesting choice to quit a job that you already have in hopes of doing that. You kind of have to have enough money to save up because it's a slow grind, much like doing a podcast is. It's a slow grind. You don't just start off making a ton of money. You got to stick with it. So quitting your paying job for a career that may or may not pan out is always a nifty decision. But so he can't pay for anything. So our author starts deciding to pay his bills because she cares about him. You know, at the beginning of a relationship, everything's always positive. It's that honeymoon phase where you guys are just so happy to be together that you overlook certain red flags and other things that your partner does that may become problematic later on. So she had a decent amount saved up before they started dating, and he ended up blowing a lot of it on weed, fast food, and like league accounts. So some of that stuff, you know, the bills is a little bit understandable, but once you start blowing it on frivolous things, when you're already not able to provide for yourself, that's not good. So the worst was yet to happen. She found out about this and called him out on it, you know, justifiably so. And he said that he would change, and she trusted him. Not gonna lie, that was a mistake. Obviously, she knows that now, but man, if you guys catch somebody doing some really weird out-of-pocket stuff like that, they're pretty deep in. If they already have like multiple accounts trying to talk to different people, that's weird. I'm not gonna lie. That's when you cut things off. But things got worse, and she got scared to leave because he was abusive. He would shove her into the wall, scream in her face, and just get really intimidating, which, you know, again, is such a wuss move as like an older guy trying to scare a younger girl. Is really, that irks me. But anyways, she goes through the iPad that he has and found out that he was actively selling pictures of her from when she was 16 or 17, and he is doing the same thing with his ex. So, you know, that's horrendous, and he definitely need to be locked up for that. And she ends up putting Gorilla Glue in the charging port to just make sure that the iPad can never charge again and that nobody else can see these pictures, which was smart. But, you know, obviously he wasn't going to take that well. So he, again, screams in her face and wrestling her to the ground as she's trying to leave and ends up putting her in a chokehold. So that's really scary because a lot of the times people don't know their own strength. So even if they don't want to necessarily kill somebody, chokeholds, you never really know exactly how much pressure you're putting on the other person because, you know, everybody kind of looks the same trying to get out of a chokehold. It's hard to breathe. They're fighting for their life. So it's just a bad situation. And then he ends up dragging her by her feet out of the apartment and down the stairs. And he had her wallet, her keys, and all of her valuables. So she ends up calling the police after this incident where, you know, she gets dragged down the stairs and has all this bruising and cuts. And the cops, you know, being, as useless as they typically are, did nothing about it. So great job. Then we fast forward and, you know, he has nowhere to stay or live because he got evicted from the apartment. And one day she is going to get a shirt out of her car and he's in her car charging his phone. She left the door unlocked because she lived in a good area. Guys, if I've told you once, I've told you a million times. Lock your doors. Please. Please. It's so easy to do, and it will prevent you from a slew of issues. From people breaking in to, you know, things getting stolen. And it's just a peace of mind thing. You don't want to have to worry about that. I don't care how good the neighborhood is. Because every town where things have happened that are terrible, people always say, oh, that was, you know, it was the best town. We never locked our doors. We didn't think anything would happen like that. No town is immune from bad crimes happening. I hate to break it to you if you live in some idyllic city, but that's just not how life works. And predators will take advantage of that if that's the general consensus of the area. If you know that nobody locks their doors, then that is, those people sound like a pretty easy lick if you're trying to steal something. There was also a serial killer, I forget which one, who said that he took unlocked doors as an invitation to come inside. So whenever you're thinking about leaving your doors unlocked, I want you to think about that. A serial killer said that he took unlocked doors as a sign to go inside. You never know just how sick some people are thinking or what they're going through, what type of mental issues they have. They may not be thinking rationally. So it's best to just take the easy precaution, lock your doors, I beg of you. But she finds him in her car charging his phone, and, she tells him to get out, and she tries, getting inside and locking him out. And he runs over and is trying to pull her out of the car. And thankfully, a customer saw this because she's at her job when this incident happens. And they call the police, and the police actually arrested him, which was nice. But she ended up getting fired for that incident at work, which is absolutely insane. It's like, oh, you're getting abused? You're fired. What sense does that make? How do you rationalize that? How heartless can you be? Like, if anybody deserves sympathy and extra support, it's people going through abusive situations, because oftentimes it's very difficult for them to leave, and, they risk violence from their partners, because even if people get like restraining orders and stuff, a lot of the times, we talked about this like 2 weeks ago, I want to say, people will just violate them and just come and hurt those people. And that's what happens in a lot of these domestic violence situations. It's really hard for them to escape. And those people just need a lot of love and support. But she gets fired from her job for that, which is insane. And he somehow gets bailed out of jail, and he was giving out her phone number to other people who were in jail. So this guy's he's just a bad guy all around. If it's not abundantly obvious at this point, he's doing like 6 different things that he should be locked up for. And he gets out and finds his way to her house. But luckily, a neighbor sees him like snooping around her backyard and calls her dad. And her dad goes out there, and he has a gun with him, which causes the perpetrator to run off. And he wasn't shot, which they mentioned in the story. Even though, not gonna lie, kind of had it coming. But he harasses her continuously, saying that he's going to show up to her graduation and ruin everything. And he's making multiple fake accounts on social media harassing her. And in this new age of social media, this is how a lot of harassment goes. People will make different accounts and just bombard people with, hurtful things. And to this day, he's still doing that. So we don't even have a resolution yet, but I will let you guys know if I find out more information. But I just really hope that girl's okay and that she's able to get this dude out of her life, because he is just bad news. Alrighty, guys, that's going to do it for episode 31 of Real Stories. This week you have heard Hooded Dude by user melodic-wallaby4324. Then, a story from a user who preferred to remain anonymous. And finally, My Ex Has Harassed Me for Almost 2 Years by Bumblequeef420. All stories were read with the permission of their respective authors, and if you have a story that you'd like to hear on the show, please email it to me at thearspodcast@gmail.com. That's thearspodcast@gmail.com, and you can remain anonymous. Also, make sure you check out the YouTube channel, Real Stories, and if you like the show, give it a positive review, and also, for 10% off your first month of therapy with BetterHelp, go to betterhelp.com/realstories, all one word. Alrighty, guys, have a great rest of your week, and I will see you next time with a brand new episode. Stay safe.